Joining us from our office in Dallas, Texas, the beautiful and talented Leigh Richardson, Dr. Leigh Richardson. She's the founder of the Brain Performance Institute and the Brain Performance Center in Dallas, Texas, and she knows about your brain, and that's why she's here to talk to us about tonight. Hi, Leigh. How are you?
Hi, Jim. It's great to be back with you.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, this is our third of 3 interviews on Thursday. I want to point out again, the phone lines are open. Call at 325-225-5546. Ticker on the bottom of the screen here. You can also send a text message if you're shy. That's 408-458-5088. That's all running. And like I was saying in the introduction, Leigh and I, we will bust in. We'll put your phone call on regardless of where we are in the conversation. So that's what we got going on. So, well, that's not me. So I don't know what's going on there. Too much technology, Leigh, and I know you addressed that too, but I want to get back to basically the title of this third interview. And I never asked you, Leigh, are these titles or chapters in your book?
They correspond with chapters.
Yeah.
I mean, that book is in the formative stage, but it's
Right.
all relative.
Right. I understand that. So, yeah, okay. And so we're titling this Future-Proofing the Leader's Brain. And I want to point out, before we go on here, that when we're talking about leaders here, you don't necessarily have to run a organization or a company. You're the leader of your own life. So we're all leaders. So this applies to everybody, right?
Absolutely. The biggest leader I've ever known in my life was a mother. So
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well
yeah.
put. Well put. My mother's 100 years old, still active, still running around. Yeah, and she's leading, whether I want her to or not. Okay, so I went through the talking points you sent me, and I got a bunch of questions about. You want to talk about neuroplasticity? What is that?
So neuroplasticity is what gives the brain the ability to change. And when the brain gets stuck and we lose our mental flexibility and, oh, it's my way or the highway, we're lacking neuroplasticity. And the good news is that you can teach your brain to become more neuroplastic, to rewire itself in response to experience and intentional practice. Learn something new. It can be, I mean, the hardest thing that I can think of to learn would be a new language, but some people are very adept at language. So for them, perhaps, they will learn to read a different type of book. For me, when I want to create neuroplasticity, I don't use my phone for instructions. I pull out a map and I try to figure out how I'm going to get from point A to point B by looking at a map.
And your kids say, "What's that?"
Now, my kids say, "Why would you want to do that?"
Yeah, okay. Now, you also talked about brain resilience and cognitive resilience. Are those the same thing or different? Or how does that apply to neuroplasticity? Is it a synonym or is it something different?
Well, resilience is your brain's ability. Jim, as long as everything's going my way, I am rocking. Then I hit that bump in the road, and all of a sudden, I don't like that, and I don't like that, and I don't want to talk to you, and I'm just going to isolate. So resilience has to deal with, on a cognitive level, being able to think through it and ask yourself, was that really that big a deal, or am I overreacting? And on an emotional level, using some logical thinking to get you through the process instead of just that emotional reaction. Well, that really me off, and I don't like that. And then when we find ourselves down and feeling weak, we tend to isolate. We tend to pull back, and maybe we isolate from our friends, our family, from our job. But lack of resilience really is crippling to our brain. And the one thing that we have constant, Jim, in today's world, it's change. And the one thing that we're all going to do, at least, I hope it's not once a week, but at least once every couple of weeks, we're going to hit a bump in the road.
This reminded me of, I had a guy on here, interviewed a guy named Steve Mera, who's a paranormal researcher from the United Kingdom. This is about 2-3 weeks ago. And Steve is a very, very busy man. And we had talked to him about that. It's like, how do you keep track of all this work? You're everywhere. And he said, well, and it basically came out that he's very, very agreeable. He's a very agreeable person. He doesn't really, it's just, it seems like we got a call here. I'm going to take it. Okay.
Okay.
To Jim and Leigh.
Hey, caller. Hello. Who's this?
Hello.
Yeah.
This is Bob from Texas.
Bob. Hello. How you doing?
Good, sir. Good, sir. So I'm just reaching out to both of you because I've been listening to the first two editions of this, but both of you started the opening of this series with, this isn't just about being a business executive. This is about just leading your life and a normal person. And Leigh Richardson corresponded like the greatest leader she ever knew was a housewife. So I'm just wondering, how does a normal Joe like myself or that woman take a lot of suggestions that you have and build on this brain capital that we're talking about?
Leigh?
I think that's a really good question. And I think that, brain capital starts with brain health. And so to build on brain capital, we have to create brain health. And that's very difficult to do. And that's based on some foundational things. And one is your diet, nutrition. If you've ever heard the saying, you are what you eat, that's a very true fact. And then the second foundation is sleep. And oftentimes we do not have a sleep foundation. And, when you're a mother, that you're constantly on call. If you've got 4 kids and you're on call, you sleep when you can. But building some habits around your sleep can help give you what you need as far as being a leader. And I think the other is, it comes down to, how do you take care of yourself? And self-care, if you have 4 kids, you don't have a lot of time for self-care. If you run an organization of 10,000 people, you don't have a lot of time for self-care. But carving out, one of the best advice that I give people is, how do you start your morning? Take 10 minutes each morning and practice. Maybe you go to mindfulness, maybe you go to gratitude, maybe you just go to peace and quiet, maybe you go to prayer, but take 10 minutes for yourself to start your day in a state of control.
Hey, Bob, I don't know if you heard our very beginning here, but you started talking about this too, about the fact that this doesn't, when Leigh, not me, what the hell am I talking about? When Lee's talking about leaders, we already established the fact that she's talking about everybody. Because, yeah, you're the leader of your own life too. So I don't know if you got that or,
I did, and thank you for the clarity on that, and thank you for, sounds like whatever you want to do, you've got to get your personal habits together, and that should help give you the foundation to do what you need to do.
Yeah. Hey, before you go, Bob, I got a question, Leigh. So how do you change your habits?
Well, Jim, they say that it takes at least 21 days to change those habits.
Is that true? I've never heard that. Never have.
Well, I think it starts with setting goals. You have to set goals. You have to identify, what behavior do you want to change? And then, Jim, you got to be able to answer the big question. Why do you want to change that behavior? Because we'll hear something on the radio, Jim, and it'll make us think, oh, yeah, if I quit doing that, or if I started doing that, I'd be so much more effective. But you've got to have ingrained in yourself the what and the why. What do I want to change, and why do I want to change it?
Is there something too, Leigh, about the thing about, the old adage about you don't necessarily break an old habit, you make a new one? Is there something to that?
I think there absolutely is. And I think, if you've ever heard the term habit stacking, because you can take a new habit and couple it with an old habit. And sometimes that new habit can couple with part of the old habit. An example of that is when I decided I wanted to start practicing my gratefulness and my mindfulness every morning. And then, I'd get busy. I'd check my email. And I decided that I'm going to take in the morning when I get up and I have my coffee, that's when I'm going to practice, whether it's prayer, mindfulness, whatever it is, I'm going to couple those two activities, and then it becomes ingrained. Then it becomes more normal.
Hey, Bob, do you have any other questions?
No, thank you for taking the time to answer my questions, and I'll turn it over to the next person.
Thanks for
Have a good
calling,
evening.
Bob. Really appreciate it. Take care.
So, Jim, that was such a good point that he made, and you know as well as I do that regardless of where you are in life, we all have decisions that we have to make every single day, and we have to make those decisions in a way that don't only just impact us, but they impact what's going on around us. And one of the frameworks that I've used a lot is it's called the ODA loop, OODA. Observe what's going on around you. I also refer to that as self-awareness, and get oriented in the situation. Okay, are people angry? Are people happy? Are people looking to me for an answer? And then you got to do the hard thing, and that's make a decision. And once you decide, then you have to execute and you have to act. And I think that if anybody that goes through a day and they find themselves, because I'll find, oh, that decision, I don't want to think about that right now, but I have to. So I'll just step back and I'll ask myself, okay, what's going on around me? What's my orientation? Do I agree? Do I disagree? What decision do I need to make? And then take action.
You were talking about, taking 10 minutes in the morning. Leigh, I have to tell you this. I'm an absolute wreck in the morning, and I have been my entire life. I mean, I know it sounds kind of humorous, and it is, but really, it's a problem for me. It's even one of the reasons I do this at night. I know a lot of people, like my wife, my wife says the most clarity she has mentally is the first 15 minutes after she wakes up. I can't relate to that at all. It's one of the reasons I do this in the evening. My entire life has been basically, I mean, I used to be a professional musician, so I'm kind of used to working at night, but I learned, and I think maybe you're kind of touching on this too, about taking some time in the morning. I don't even take a call now before noon because I'm so mentally screwed up. All I'm going to do is make an ass out of myself, and I have many, many times. And I finally decided I just have to come to terms with this and not do this anymore.
Well, Jim, what you're doing is you're playing to your strengths. You're not playing to your weaknesses.
That's right.
And,
You're right. Absolutely.
That's right. And maybe it's not time in the morning. Maybe it's time at the end of the day. But it's time that you use to and I say this a lot, hit the pause button, stop, and check in with yourself. And I don't know what you think about late in the day. Are you thinking about your day the next day? Are you playing over in your head what you did today? But use that time, whatever time works for you, to orientate yourself for your brain health. What makes you feel good?
We have another call. I'm going to take it, okay?
Okay.
Hi, you're on the air. Who's this?
Hey, this is Think.
Hey, Think, how you doing?
Me on, Jim.
Hey, I want to point out to Leigh that
Right.
Think's one of our regular callers, Leigh. So,
well, hi, Think. Thanks for calling.
Yeah. You got a question for
Hi,
Dr.
Leigh.
Richardson?
Yeah, I have a very important question. It's been a question I've been debating, and I think I went over this with you as well. But I know for a fact this is a debate that I've been having for a long time with people, and that's whether we are born with specific traits already in place. A prime example of this is Jeffrey Dahmer. See, I believe that Jeffrey Dahmer, if you had taken him and put him in a more caring, loving situation, he would not have been born a serial killer like that. But people are saying there are people that actually believe that no matter where you put him, he would have been this psychotic person that went around killing because he was born with a missing chromosome or something like that. Can I ask you, is that true?
Well, I can tell you what I think, and that is there are 4 things that puts a brain in a dysregulated state. Genetics is certainly one of them. Another is physical head trauma. Anytime you hit your head, you change the way those neurons and dendrites are wiring and firing. Emotional trauma. Now, the amount of emotional trauma that you grow up with in your home life, that's a huge factor. And then stress. All four of those are part of your environment, and they influence how your brain wires and fires. So I think that, I'll rephrase your question. If we would have taken him and put him in an environment where he had that chromosome and he had a loving and warm and nurturing family, and he never had emotional trauma, which I believe is impossible in today's world, and he never had any physical head trauma, would he have been a different person? I think so.
Leigh, this is totally off topic, but I'm going to ask this. Does true evil exist?
That's a hard question, Jim. I mean, there's many sources. You can read the Bible and you can get an answer for that. You can read, there's a lot of work done on that. And because true evil, I think it does exist. Sometimes it exists on a subconscious level, and sometimes maybe it exists on a conscious level.
I'm going to let you go. We got another phone call, okay?
Thanks.
Call back later if you want, all right? Appreciate it. Thank you. We got all sorts of calls here. We got two of them. Here we go. Hi, who's this?
Abigail.
Abigail, hi. Thanks for calling in. Appreciate it. You have a question for Dr. Richardson?
I do, yeah. I was wondering, when you're making decisions, and all of us, of course, want to make good decisions, but what level of impact does uncertainty do to your brain health and making those good decisions?
I think that's a really good question, particularly in today's day and age, because anytime we get uncertain, fear starts to roll into our decision-making process, and we start riding the roller coaster. That autonomic nervous system gets kicked out of balance, and we start going from fight, flight, freeze, fight, flight, freeze. And whenever we're riding that roller coaster, it's really difficult to make a good decision. And uncertainty, if there's one thing that I would say you can bet money on, that is, we are living in a world where change is constant. It's getting more complex every single day, and the pressure is getting more intense. So the uncertainty is going to be there. And that kind of links back to what we had talked about, Jim, in the beginning of the show. And that's building resilience. That resilience on a cognitive level, an emotional level, and a social level. And that's what gives the brain the ability to adapt quickly and to recover from that mental strain. And uncertainty does create mental strain.
And Abigail, I'm going to ask a question on your behalf, a follow-up for you here too. Leigh, what's the difference between, if everyone's a leader, what's the difference between an experienced and an inexperienced leader?
Well, they're very, an experienced leader, they have more ingrained habits and they have more knowledge base. They've got a bigger experience base, but there's good and there's bad in that, Jim. With an emerging leader, they may be more adaptable. They may be willing to try different solutions. They may be more agile, quicker to react because they don't have that built-in baggage. But at the same time, they haven't had the time to build up their coping mechanisms. So regardless of where you are in your leadership role, be intentional. Stop and think through the decisions that you need to make instead of just reacting to them.
And that's kind of, in some ways that just applies to youth, doesn't it too? I mean, youth doesn't have a lot of experience doing a lot of stuff. And what am I talking about?
I think what you're saying is age does play into it. And certainly I can assure you I made much better decisions at 30 than I did at 20.
Oh, we don't even want to go there, Leigh.
No, we don't. That's for sure.
No. Abigail, are you under 21?
I wish I were.
Yeah,
No.
no, so you can relate too, right? Anything?
I can relate, yes.
You got any other questions for Dr. Richardson, Abigail?
No. Thank you for answering, and thank you both for your time. I appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for calling. We really appreciate it. You take care, all right?
All right.
Bye
All
bye.
right. Thanks so much. Bye bye.
Oh, people are calling to talk to you, Dr. Richardson. Look at that. It's pretty cool.
That's because you're such a great host, Jim.
Oh man. You're just buttering me up. Okay, I got more questions. All right.
Okay.
I mean, I hear this term passed around constantly, but I never really heard a definition for it. What's neurofeedback?
So neurofeedback is, have you heard the term biofeedback? And biofeedback is when you're like using your breathing, you're feeding back to your body. When you slow your breath rate down, you slow your heart rate down. And with neurofeedback, what you're doing is you are picking up the electrical activity that's going on all through the head, and you're measuring that, and you're setting thresholds. And when you can change the way the brain's wiring and firing to hit those thresholds, the brain will know it because you get the feedback loop. The brain is watching something on a monitor, and the picture stays bright. And the brain, ooh, that's what I need to be doing. And neurofeedback is just a way to create organic change in the brain, to get the brain from a dysregulated state to a regulated state. And it's something that is, some people will say, well, gee, Leigh, I don't do that voodoo. And my response to that is, I don't either. And neurofeedback has been around for a long time, and the technology has come, it's so advanced. And now there are ways that you can even do it in your home. And it's only in the last year or so that I have had the confidence to say that. But neurofeedback will train your brain how to get into a regulated state. And that's, Jim, I can slap a diagnosis code on something, and people are like, okay, am I anxiety? Am I depressed? Am I bipolar? And my response to that is, you got a dysregulated brain. And I think we tend to, and I put an article on my LinkedIn last Sunday, I think we tend to diagnose too much, and then we get lost in the diagnosis.
Well, I think a lot of people agree with that, and that is that we're all pretty much overdiagnosed with everything. But I have a question, and it's going to sound like I'm kidding here, but I'm actually not. Does this neurofeedback thing work just because we're all cavemen attracted to shiny objects? Seriously, is that a problem?
Well, I do believe in the placebo effect, Jim. And I've done research, been on panels that look at the placebo effect, even with things like surgery and implants. But I guess since I've been board certified in neurofeedback since 2005, I've seen enough of it to say it does work. It absolutely does work.
Oh, no, Leigh, I wasn't questioning that whether it worked or not. I understand that it works, but does it work because we're all just like primitive cavemen? Is that the reason it works?
Well, I would say that applies to a few of us.
Well, yeah, thank you. We're talking with Dr. Leigh Richardson about her upcoming book, Crisis Brains. You can call in at 325-225-5546, and you should do that. I had several calls already. Very nice. Very nicely. Okay, I have another question. Same type of thing. What is you talk about structured decision-making framework. What is that?
Well, a structured decision-making framework is what gives you sustainable decisions. And it's when you go through the process of making a decision. Because so many times, Jim, people, they want to problem solve and they get stuck. They think they're problem solving and then they think they're making a decision. And identifying the problem and looking at all your opportunities is certainly part of the decision-making process. But then you've got to identify all the opportunities that you have, the different variables that exist, and then you've got to identify the variables that correlate with the important aspects of the decision and evaluate each variable and look at what provides you the optimal results. So, if you just wake up and something happens and you're triggered and, I've got to make a decision about that. I've got to make a decision right now. 9 times out of 10, you're going to make a decision based on emotions instead of logic. And when we react from an emotional basis, that influences. It influences the amount of risk taking that we'll take. And it puts us into that anticipatory stage. Oh, it's coming. I can feel it coming. And that influences the actions that we take.
But if you're okay, so let's say you're in a work situation and you're dealing with an emotional issue regarding two other people, like employees. If you're dealing with an emotional problem, should you still go about it rationally, or should you inject some of your own emotionality into it because it's an emotional problem? You know what I mean?
Well, if you're at work, then I think that's a different situation than a personal situation. If
Okay.
you're at work, I think you have to think, what are the goals of the organization? What's my job? What am I supposed to do? And mostly that will not be an emotional reaction. That will be, okay, this is my job. This is your job. This is what the organization expects from us. Let's work into how we achieve those goals. On a personal situation, it's much harder to take the emotion out. And sometimes in a personal situation, the emotional can create an opening for a lot more conversation. So I think, the context, the environment of where that decision made is the answer to that question.
Thank you. That was you answered it. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. I have another thing I thought of while you were talking a couple minutes ago, too, about the fact that I have observed, this is an observation. I've observed that a lot of people, when they're trying to attack a problem, it's like they don't recognize the right culprit, for lack of a better term. Do you know what I mean? It's like, all right, they're trying to solve something, but they don't really address the real crux to the problem. It's like some peripheral thing or something like that. I mean, do you know what I'm talking about? Or
Well, I do, because, a lot of things can get in the way. You've got an urgent decision that you've got to make. And oh my gosh, it's 12 o'clock at night and you've been up since 4 a.m. in the morning. That feeds back into your sleep. And you haven't eaten all day and you're not hydrated. If you do one thing for the brain weighs 3 pounds and it's 80% water. Stay hydrated. If you're not keeping that brain hydrated, it's not going to work that well. So I think that you've got to think, Jim, that you've got to think about the brain. It's an organ, just like the heart is. And you've got to take care of it so that it can perform for you. It's, I've always said the gut is your second brain. And now I'm convinced that your heart's your third brain, because the brain and the body, it's one unit. The body keeps score of everything going on in the brain. So you've got to look at how the two are interacting, and are they complementing each other? Are they in conflict?
Leigh, does scotch count as hydration?
I've been asked that question a lot about coffee, but scotch that's a new one.
Well, I mean, no, seriously, caffeine is actually a good thing. I mean, this is, nothing is good if you abuse it, but it seems like that evidence seems to indicate that the caffeine is generally a good thing. I mean, am I right about that?
Caffeine is a dehydrator. Now, I think that caffeine does bring a lot of good. And it's so interesting because everybody's body reacts differently to caffeine. I can drink a cup of coffee at 11 o'clock at night and go right to sleep. Some people drink a cup of coffee at 11 o'clock at night and they'll be up to the wee hours of the morning. Right. So it's what your brain and your body react to.
Yeah. All right. So how does AI figure into all this? So if I'm, is there what's the tie of AI into like my decision-making process?
Well, so what AI does for me is it takes me out of that cognitive overload when I've got so much on my mind and I'm trying to sort through it. I can go into AI, and if you communicate with AI just like you do a person, ask specific questions, it'll give you answers, and that'll kind of help me to stop overthinking everything. And because when I start to overthink, I go over into cognitive overload. When I get to cognitive overload, I go into brain fatigue. So AI has got, it can simplify. And I use AI for brainstorming and to get creative. I mean, you can ask some crazy questions and get some crazy answers, but from that, I can go down a whole different path that perhaps I never would have thought of going. So I think AI is a tool, and it definitely can enhance our productivity, and it definitely can broaden the way that we think.
Hey Lee, what's the deal with now? So I'm a computer programmer, and I was my basic thing is you respect the machine. So when I'm talking to Alexa, and I have Alexa right on my desk here, but I turn her off for the show because I'm polite and say please and thank you. But some people, it's the opposite. Have you noticed that people are really starting to abuse machines, especially the ones that talk back to us? So what is that all about?
Well,
What
I
do you
think
say
that's
about
I think that's a loaded question, Jim. I mean, what comes to mind is how frustrated are they, and how stressed out are they, and what kind of care are they taking of their brain?
Yeah. All right. So okay. So if how do you how do people avoid burnout with all this stuff?
I think it comes back to self-care. And Jim, when I first heard that term self-care, it was all about having a glass of wine, getting on the couch, binge watching Netflix. And we've learned that's not self-care.
Yeah.
Self-care is taking the time for yourself and checking in with yourself.
Well, hold on just a second. I gotta stop you. So what's the difference between a glass of wine on the couch and actually taking care of yourself? What is the
well,
difference there?
Well, if you have a glass of wine, sometimes that can give you brain fog.
Oh
Sometimes
yeah,
that can, I
right.
mean, it can. And sometimes if you're on the couch all the time and you're not exercising, the brain needs to move. The brain needs movement. And actually, there was a chapter in my book, Turn the Brain On to Get Your Game On, that talked about this TV turn your brain into a couch potato.
Uh-huh.
Because there's a time to lay on that sofa and rest and relax. But self-care might be laying on that sofa and reading, or it might be laying on that sofa and practicing progressive muscle relaxation, or visualizing, closing your eyes and visualizing yourself and where you're happy and where you're successful. And Jim, I do that, and I even have conversations with myself when I'm in that visualization.
Do,
You
do
know,
you
I'll
do you swear at yourself the same way people swear at Alexa?
I can't deny it. Guilty as charged.
Do you think that we become too indulgent of luxury as a society?
I think that we crave luxury as a society because, after the pandemic, our normal changed and we met stress in a way that we had never met before. And just the very simple things, for a kid, or being able to go to school, couldn't do that, couldn't go to church, couldn't go to the gym. So many things were taken away from us that were part of our normal life. That when I first started coming out of the pandemic, I wanted to indulge myself. I wanted to pamper myself. I felt like I needed it. I felt like I had some catching up to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I grew up in small town Minnesota, and the weather up here is just brutal. But still, when I was going to school, and of course this is old, old curmudgeon thing. But when I was going to school as a kid, basically we never got more than one snow day off a year. If we got two, that was incredible. And now, and you were talking about like students for a second there. And this made me think of this. Now it seems like here in Minnesota, they will cancel school at a drop of a hat. It's like there's 1 inch of snow, cancel school. It's like, and we used to fight through 2 feet of snow. They're not canceling school. And it just makes me think: are we just becoming softies? Really, seriously?
Or are we just looking at life differently? And that is, when we used to wouldn't make that decision to cancel school, we weren't so diversified. We weren't so spread out. Getting to school was simpler. Life was just in a simpler state. And I think the more complex life gets, the further apart we live. I'm in Dallas, it's one of the most spread out cities in the United States. I mean, being 20 minutes in traffic, that's nothing.
Yeah.
If you're just going barely across town, you're going to spend 20 minutes in traffic. So when you're thinking about, well, the roads are bad, will the buses be able to make it? I think it piles on each other, and it gets harder to make a safe decision.
So
And
have we made life needlessly complex?
that's a really good question, because where does that complexity live most of the time, Jim?
I don't. Yeah.
It lives in our brain.
Right.
So, and I think that ties into stress management. Life is a lot more stressful today than it used to be. And we don't have the time to stop and say, okay, I'm going to stop for 10 minutes and work on my breathing. Because with what technology has done, and it's got its good and it's got its bad, but it's made us want that instantaneous gratification. I want an answer right now. If I get online and I go ask Google a question, I'll get an answer pretty instantaneously. Ask ChatGPT and they'll ask you, do you want sources? Do you want me to cite the sources? So just the way that information processing has changed and how we feed that to our brain. And do you remember in the pandemic when you had that news channel on 24/7?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we felt like we needed it. We had to have it. And a lot of people haven't really backed off of that. They created habits. And what's that saying? We are creatures of habits.
I have a confession to make, Leigh. To do this job, I have to read. I read hours of news every day, and I gotta admit, lately, I'm getting sick of it. I don't want to do it, but I have to. I pretty much have to. But at any rate, and the other thing you mentioned too, and talking about how life has become more complex. So now, like I said, most of my relatives live in northern Minnesota and northern Wisconsin. Right? They're basically living in the middle of nowhere. But like you, I live in the heart of a major city. For me to go like 6 blocks is like I have to put aside 20 minutes.
Absolutely.
Right, right. But what I've noticed too, and I've had friends, and maybe this is true of you. I've had friends now that have moved from the city to the middle of nowhere, and what I've noticed is that up there, you want to call it up north, quote unquote. Okay, the distances are farther, but the time is about the same. So they have basically cobbled together what I would call like a quasi metro area of these little towns and and little road stops and all that sort of stuff. And they're driving around and they're driving farther, but they're not drive. It doesn't take any longer than it takes me, And so then the point is, well, why am I here? You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. Living in Dallas, I do know what you mean. And the other thing, when your drive is peaceful and it's not stressful, maybe you'll listen to an audiobook, and when you're driving in a city and you got to be watching, you got to be checking your rear view mirror. You got to be checking your side mirrors. You're not listening to an audiobook. It's more stressful.
Right. I can't, because I'm a former musician, I can't listen to sound like that anyway. It just bugs the crap out of me. I can't do it, but that's a personal thing. All right. I have another question. Let's move on in your little outline here. What does brain first corporate culture look like? What does that mean?
Well, that's an inclusive culture. Inclusive leadership is where you include everybody. And sometimes leadership can be exclusive. You've got to meet this criteria. If you're at this grade level, if you do this, then you're included. But for a brain health culture, everybody's included. And being able to talk, just as simple, have conversations like, I sense that you're pretty stressed out today. Are you okay? That creates psychological safety. And that gives somebody the freedom to say, well, really didn't sleep last night. The baby was up. Or whatever the reason is, but opening that door, Jim, it's okay to not be okay. And we're all going to experience some time that we're not okay. It's not okay if you don't do anything about it. And a corporation can create an environment and offer resources that people can take the time that they need, whether that's through an employee assistance program, having resources to have someone to call and talk to, or just having an open door policy with their manager, being able to go in and say, I really don't think I did a very good job on my project, but I know why I didn't. And giving that person the opportunity to vent and talk through it. So then it becomes a learning experience, not a negative experience.
Leigh, that's what you said there is brilliant. And you should, oh God, hold on. I got a giant cat here. What the? Hey, you're on TV.
Is that a brain healthy cat, Jim?
Yeah. Oh, extremely. Okay. Now, and I lost my train of thought. What was I going to say? What you said. It's okay to not be okay. You should put that on T-shirts or something. That's brilliant. That really is. It's like I try to get one nugget out of every interview, and that's tonight. That was good. That's really good. Now go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm so glad you got your nugget. And if you repeat it, it will become even more valuable. I hope you do that.
Okay, I will do that. We're talking to Dr. Leigh Richardson, and you can call in here. We got a few minutes left. Still call in 325-225-5546. So, you've been the entire night. You've been talking about how sleep and nutrition affect this. Oh, all right. Well, the one thing I thought of before that I didn't get in is that, and I'm not trying to be funny here. This is like a real problem. As people get older, it seems to be mostly hormonally, but more people have trouble with their sleep schedule. It just seems that that's the way it works. So if you're having trouble for hormonal reasons or whatever reasons, and I'm not just talking about women too, I'm talking about men also. How do you deal with that?
Well, I think you need to see a doctor. I mean, because the body gets out of balance, just like the brain gets out of balance. And a lot of times what's throwing that brain or that body out of balance is lack of nutrition or allergies or inflammation. And I think every single one of us has inflammation in our body. And I think it's, it shows up as allergies. It shows up as a fever. It shows up as a pain. And I think being self-aware of what your norm is within your body will help you to know how to calibrate. Because I'll be talking with clients and I've got a headache. Oh, is that headache normal? Well, no, I don't get headaches. Well, that's a different headache. Then what time is it? 3:00 in the afternoon? Yeah, I usually get a headache around that same time. So we have to all advocate for our self-care, our physical care and our mental care. And that relies on our ability to have self-awareness, to pay attention to what's going on. Don't wait till it gets to the point where, I need to lay down. I need to go home. See it coming. And maybe if you can just stop and walk outside for 5 minutes, breathe some fresh air, feel the sun on your shoulders. Sometimes just moving. The brain loves to move. Getting up and moving a little bit will put some energy. It will change your metabolic balance.
You're talking about in terms of brain health, what's the single biggest mistake nutritionally people make, or deficiency or whatever? What's the single biggest thing?
I think that sugar is a big problem. I think that the dyes that are in food is a big problem. But I think the problem that most people eat is if it comes in a bag, a box, or a can, and it's good for 2 years, that's processed food. And if it's good for 2 years, there's something in there that is not good for your brain.
Yeah.
And my biggest piece of advice on diet is get rid of processed food.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, all right. That's a pretty good definition of processed food if it comes in a box. You're right. And my wife uses, that's her definition too. That's what she uses. But is there a particular deficiency that we all seem to have in terms of nutritionally or supplement wise, or Is there like I'm not talking about a quick fix so much as like what's the major thing? If you're going to address the first thing, what would it be?
Well, I think we're all mineral deficient, and a lot of that has to come into play into how our crops are grown. I mean, unless you're an organic farmer, the dirt, the soil is not regenerated, and it gets exhausted. We're all lacking magnesium. If there's one thing that I could say we could all benefit from, it would be magnesium, because that's supposed to come from the food that we eat, but
that's what I wanted. That's exactly the type of thing I wanted to know. And I know for a fact that magnesium will help you sleep too. So there's that also. It could
absolutely.
be take it before you go to bed, and you're good to go. All right. So what are the 3 habits every leader should start tomorrow? What are they?
I think I named one of them already, and that is start your day off in the right headspace. And whether that's taking some time for mindfulness, or maybe it's making your list for the day, take that time to set yourself up for success. And so that you know what you have to do, and you've got your head kind of wrapped around it, and you have your game plan. Turn your brain on to get your game on.
Yeah. And you use this term, which I just love, decision hygiene. It sounds very dirty, Leigh.
And it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But really, all I'm talking about there, Jim, is don't let yourself get into an overload with decision makings. We think, oh, got to make a decision on that today. Not now. Oh, got to make that decision. Not now. Then, we're 3 decisions behind. And okay, I've got to make these decisions, but you're in an overload state. And so you just continuously overthink it. You think about it, you think about it, you think about it. And that affects the quality of decisions that you make. You're not making, maybe you do make the right decisions for all the wrong reasons. Maybe you don't. But anytime you're overthinking, you're not making the most productive, efficient decision for everybody.
I'm guilty, or I should say, I used to be guilty of that. I've gotten much better as I get older, but yeah, I understand that concept totally. I do. And then what do you mean by micro recoveries? What's that?
So, and I think we've talked about this before, Jim. Hit the pause button. Take little breaks. And my testimony to that is a study that Microsoft did during the pandemic. They were seeing how fatigued everybody was going from one Zoom meeting to another continuously. And they actually did a little study where they did some brain maps, and they looked at the brainwave activity. And they did 2 separate studies. And the first was when you were in a Zoom meeting, and then you zoomed off to the next one, and it could be on any context, any subject matter, and they saw what it did to the brain. Then the second study they did is they put a 10-minute break between Zoom meetings, and they saw how the quality of the brain increased because the brain stayed in more of a rested and calm state. So take little recoveries. Take 5 minutes, take 10 minutes just to stop and give yourself a chance to hit that calm button instead of running. And some of us, we get so used to, we run so fast and furious, and we think we have to, that it's hard. It's hard to say, slow down, stop, look out the window.
I used to be a classical musician, and it's very standard in the orchestra business for many, many years, probably a couple 100 years. Orchestra rehearsals work like this. We play for 90 minutes, then we take a half-hour break, and then we play for another hour, and that's your rehearsal. And that probably goes back maybe 150 years, because after 90 minutes of concentration, people are shot. So they need they need the 30 minutes to recover so we can get back to doing some more. It's pretty simple, but yeah, that's the way it works.
I mean, that is in being protective of your brain. And just like, physical exertion, you can't exercise. The people that try to go to the gym and exercise 3 or 4 hours a day, and you look at the comparison that Olympic athletes, they know how to train, and they have recovery factored into their training.
It's funny you should mention that. I had this last weekend, I was at a little party and I was talking to a professional athlete, a professional hockey player, and we were talking about what people should do to work out. And he said, don't even bother, just walk. That's what he said. He said, just walk. Nobody walks. He said, that's all you have to do. It's like, yeah, I need to train because, I'm getting paid to do it. But he said, yeah, you want to be healthy, just walk. And my 100-year-old mother, people ask her constantly, what's your secret? And that's what she says. I keep walking. I walk. So
always listen to your mother, Jim.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I know, especially at this point of all things. So Leigh, how can people contact you if they want to talk to you, more information or that sort of thing?
Absolutely. They can reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's Dr. Leigh Richardson. They can reach out on the website, the Brain Performance Center or the Brain Performance Institute, or call and just ask for a consultation, 214-329-9017.
We'll put this information on our show blog too, so people, if they at jimandknight.com. And I do want to point out, it's the brainperformancecenter.com, but if I'm right, it's the brainperformanceinstitute.co, right?
You are correct.
Right.
Absolutely.
I made that mistake and I learned. So I'm a learner. That's what I can do. Leigh, this has been fantastic. I want to point out the name of your book coming out. It's Crisis Brains, Unlocking Brain Capital for Smarter Decisions. And we'll have you back again when it's actually released, just for giggles, nothing else.
Thank you so much, Jim, for having me.
Thank you. This has been fantastic. It's been fantastic. 3 Thursdays in a row. I really appreciate it, Leigh. And we've learned a lot. So, and our thanks to the callers too. They're very nice of them. People call in. So anyway, I'm going to let you go. It's like, I think we got the job done. I hope we did.
I think we did too. Have a good night, Jim.
You take
care. I know you're going to be up for a little while.
I am. I'm going to be up for a little while. That's right. That's what I do, Leigh. That's the thing. You take care. All right. I'll see you soon. Okay.
Good night.
Bye-bye.